Hello. Now, he has created some of the music for some of the biggest shows on both the West End and Broadway. But now the musician, Tim Minchin, is taking centre stage himself and bringing us his first studio album, something like this. Tim is joining us now. Hello to you, Tim. A very good morning to you.
Hello, Kay. How are you?
I am very well indeed. Tell me about this new album. Sounds great.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it sounds great. That clip's of a song called "The Absence of You," which is very hyper romantic, and not the whole album is not quite that unironic. But yeah, it's definitely a studio record. It's a set of 11 songs. They're kind of storytelling songs. They're about love and life, and they're kind of quirky and a bit unromantic, romantic, like I often am. And people are really responding to it well, and I'm very, very happy about that.
Apart Together, how very apt for 2020. But you wrote it before the events of the pandemic, didn't you?
Yeah, I've been, you know, I didn't just sit in a studio for 6 weeks. So it sort of got built over a couple of years after we moved back to Australia in 2018, and kind of finished it as the pandemic started. And around that time, one of the songs on the record is called "Apart Together," which is actually one of these romantic, unromantic songs, which addresses the fact that love is really, when you're in a monogamous relationship, about watching each other fall apart. So it's about falling apart together. But that was going to become the title of the album, and then suddenly the word "apart together" became synonymous with sort of COVID stuff. And the whole album, in fact, has sort of been influenced by the world we live in now and had a total different light shone on it. And it's quite interesting how it now feels like it really belongs in this year.
You say that you've gone back to Australia a couple of years ago, did live in America for quite a long time, didn't you? When you look back at what's happening in the US at the moment, not least with COVID, but also because of the election, what do you see?
Look, it's such a long conversation, isn't it? I think obviously it goes without saying for someone like me, I suppose, that I think that president's done hopefully not irreparable, but terrible, deep damage to that country, just because his rhetoric is so divisive. Obviously, policy matters hugely, but how nations talk about themselves and talk about their enemies, this division that we have in Britain as well and in Australia, increasing binary ideas of who we are, it worries me. I think about it all the time, and I'm worried about my friends over there with what's happening with COVID. I'm worried about this election resolving as it should, but I'm quite smug that I'm sitting here in Australia by the beach.
You talked a little bit about COVID there, and it's had a huge impact, of course, on the industry that you have been involved with for so long. I'm sure many of our viewers know that you did a very successful stage adaptation of Roald Dahl's Matilda, amongst other things. But it's absolutely decimated the theatre industry, certainly here in the United Kingdom.
It really has. And I get asked, like everyone does, how has COVID affected you? And really how it's affected me, it just doesn't matter compared to how much it's affected the people who rely on my work or work I've contributed to for their livelihoods. So hundreds of people around the world make their livings off Matilda and other things I'm involved in. And it is a desperate time. I understand there are even your last guest, you know, the balance between trying to advocate for her trade and understand that there's necessities of, I live in a country where we have locked down very hard and now basically we have virtually no COVID in the country. That's not going to happen in Britain. It's a totally different scenario. But the theatre industry and the arts, I think we have always undervalued what they contribute, not just economically, but what they contribute to, connected to the Trump conversation, to our national identity, the stories we tell ourselves. And I am desperately worried, but optimistic just because there's no point in not being. I'm sure theatre will survive, and I just hope some of the very difficult decisions your government have to make, I hope they include thinking about the long-term cultural and economic impact that the arts has on your country.
What impact has COVID had on Australia, Tim? What's it been like living through it?
Well, we've been very lucky, and we're obviously down in Victoria. I live in New South Wales, Victoria. So each state is sort of a region and is dealing with it in their own way. Victoria had an outbreak, and this whole state got shut down really hard for a really long time. Like, don't leave your house for 3 months apart from a walk with your dog. And they went from having hundreds of cases on the brink of uncontrolled outbreak to 0 cases, 0 new cases, 0 deaths, 0 for the last 20 days. So they've basically expunged it from there, which is, again, different from Britain, but we are a model of what you can do with a discrete population if you go hard at it, which doesn't speak to the economic suffering that we're going to continue to have. But we are just so lucky, and we know we're lucky, and our hearts go out to you guys, because most of my friends are in Britain and I'm talking to them all the time. And it's, I don't think we'll really understand what this thing did to us culturally and emotionally and psychologically until some years hence, and we'll look back and go, wow. It's hard to quantify, isn't it? It's why we keep asking each other these questions. Yeah,
exactly. Now, during the break, let's lighten the mood. During the break, I heard you a bit of honky tonk on that piano. I wondered if you might possibly share 30 seconds of that for our viewers. Go on.
This is how I deal with COVID, right? I just sit in my room and play the blues. Honestly, I think the fact that I'm a musician is some kind of miracle anyway, because I never thought I'd be able to make a living out of it. But in times like this, I do music. And this comes back to the question about the arts. I'm so blessed to be able to play, but for all of us, this is the stuff we go to, right? When we're locked in our houses, is television and stories and music. And I don't know, the romantic in me thinks as long as we keep, communication and music and art alive, we'll survive as a species. But for me, on a personal level, it's just an escape. It's just something I get to do that I just think, it's why I'm so passionate about music education, and the Royal Shakespeare Company with Matilda's constantly pumping money into music education. And I do a lot of, a bit of not enough charity work with kids and stuff. Like, for me, like for Matilda, stories are her escape. For me, music's my escape.
Play us out with a bit more on the piano, if you would. Indulge us.
All right, bye. This is a much better interview. I should do more of this and less of this. Buy my album out now with all your spare COVID money.